the cannabis conversation in Ireland. Okay, so industrial hemp is really very well suited to Irish climate conditions. It's a crop with a really long history of cultivation in Ireland. The modern usages of the crop, I know I don't have to repeat that. It's, you know, cosmetics, food, beverages, body care, nutritional supplements, clothing, fabrics, textiles, industrial yarns, spun fibres, paper, packaging, construction and insulation materials, supports bioenergy production, energy storage solutions, as well as the manufacture of petrochemical replacement products, including hemp-based plastics, industrial plastics, fiberglass, etc. So, it can be grown as a fibre, seed or an oil crop, and also as a dual-purpose crop. So in the 1990s there was a resurgence of interest in the hemp, commercial hemp farming, and this was encouraged by the introduction of subsidies at EU level. So hemp was once the most widely traded commodity in the world, okay? And then the scientifically unsupported classification of hemp as a controlled substance and its prohibition led to the growth of wood-based paper manufacturing, an explosion of petrochemical industries, and the growth of the cotton industry, all of which have had a detrimental impact on the Earth's planetary ecosystem. So, although the international narcotics conventions, okay, so international ones, okay, do not consider industrial hemp to come within the remit of those conventions. Okay, do you understand what I mean? That, you know, those international conventions are given effect in our local legislation, right, in our domestic legislations. And the domestic legislations have included, you know, hemp in misuse of drug acts, etc. But the conventions themselves don't. Okay? So, and that's because they specifically want to encourage. So if you look at the single convention on narcotic drugs, look at the preamble to it. What they want is to encourage the, you know, use of industrial hemp for both industrial products and for horticultural purposes. They specifically state that. Okay, so they shouldn't be included in the Misuse of Drugs Act, and indeed our government fully intends to remove it. So prohibition also brought with it the exclusion of hemp from human diets. Okay, so hemp is, as we've heard, the most complete plant-based protein known to man. It has all 9 essential amino acids. It has omega-3, 6 and 9 in optimal bioavailable ratio, and it has considerable nutritional health and medicinal properties. Okay, so we've heard Professor Thorne talking about the IPCC, and he didn't mention the transition pathways that are based on high protein, low energy agricultural food production, and that particular pathway, the IPCC tells us, has the highest co-benefits, including for human health. Okay, so there's 2 things, right, that we need to think about, right? We're in a position now where we have the birth of an industry happening around us. Ireland is quite slow compared to the rest of Europe. Okay, there's been absolutely no research on hemp in Ireland for more than 20 years. Teagasc did some work in 1999, and that's the last time it's done. In the meantime, a massive global industry has grown. Okay, the industry insiders predict an upper market value of 115 billion euros by 2028 for this industry. Okay, so as well as the protein element of this crop, there's another nutritional aspect of the crop, and it's so poorly understood, and it is the site of so much contention. And so what I'm going to do is, to the best of my capacity to understand what more educated people tell me, is that in 1964, an Israeli researcher called Raphael Mechoulam, He was studying the effects of marijuana on the human body, and so he added a radioactive label to a marijuana cigarette. Now that behaves a bit like a blue dye in a kidney scan. So it let him see what was happening inside of the human body and how the plant material interacted with the human body. Okay? And what he saw was that there was something in the plant that was binding perfectly to receptors inside of the human body. Okay? And this hadn't really, as far as I know, ever been seen before. That something outside of the human body, plant material, an exogenous thing, was perfectly binding to receptors in the human body. Okay, so this led to 50, 60 years of intensive research to try and find out what this receptor was and what was happening. And first quite slowly and then more quickly, it was discovered that we have inside of our bodies a whole entire, what's called an endocannabinoid system. Okay, it exists in the human body at a subcellular level. And correspondingly, the cannabis family of plants, including industrial hemp, has a corresponding phytocannabinoid system, so plant-based cannabinoid system. And what the interaction is that the plant-based cannabinoids can feed and upregulate the endocannabinoid system inside of the human body. Okay? And that's why people feel better when they take full spectrum CBD. It's not that they're being cured of anything in particular, it's that the function of the endocannabinoid system is to upregulate your homeostasis. Okay? So it improves the body's capacity to keep itself in a state of optimal well-being. That's its function. Okay? And so when you take CBD, you're feeding that system. And so in performing its function, you do feel better. It just makes you feel as healthy as you can possibly feel. So that's one thing that discovery has driven the scientific research and technological advancements in the industry that we're witnessing today. Okay? And the second thing that's driving it is the environmental potentials of the plant. Okay? So now here we come to the question. There's so much money available, okay? Corporations, endless numbers of corporations want to have control of this plant, okay? So corporate food want it, corporate pharma want it, corporate tobacco want it. So what we have now here is that more and more governments are delivering on medicinal cannabis, okay? So recreational cannabis markets are also being regulated around the world. You saw cannabis being legalized and regulated in Canada, for example, in 2018. So, and the hemp industry is experiencing exponential growth. Okay, so we already know how much the markets are going to be worth. Okay, an awful lot of money. So you have all of these interests. Corporate pharma, food, drinks, tobacco, etc. And they're dictating the way in which the market gets constructed. Okay? That's what they're doing. Okay, so they're determining the way in which this industry gets developed into the future. Okay? So let's have a look, right? And this is going to take about 5 minutes and then I'm going to be done, right? So if you look at what happened in, let's say, California when they were doing stuff, let's look at Proposition, what do they call that? The Proposition 64. So this was to kind of get their cannabis industry going, okay? So it was introduced in 2016 in conjunction with the legalization of cannabis in California. Was to be the gold standard in environmental policy, okay? It would provide encouragement for small-scale farmers practicing ecologically sound and sustainable farming methods, with funding for conservation, habitat protection, enforcement of environmental law, the whole thing, you know, American dream environmental protections. In practice, what actually happened was that before the legislation ever went into effect, the important environmental provisions were all overridden by the state, okay? And this effectively disabled the environmental safeguards, and it encouraged corporate growth. Okay, and this is from Dr. Tony Savallo, who is a scholar in Humboldt State University. So why did that happen? It happened because the corporate cannabis lobby spent more than $1 million lobbying policymakers to push for legislation limiting the profitability of SMEs. Okay, and how they did that is that they introduced really, really, really expensive and difficult to fulfill licensing procedures. Okay? Now, what I want to do for a second is I want to switch back now away from America over to Europe. Okay, in 1997, the European Union introduced what they call a novel food catalogue. Okay, and anything that wasn't a traditionally eaten food in the European Union prior to May of 1997 was going to be considered a novel food. Okay, a new food, and you'd have to get a special regulation in order to get it. Okay, or to be able to sell it. So I have, in 1997, the hemp industry in Europe collects all this data, right, showing extensive food use. And the European Union say to them, that's fine, yes, of course hemp is a traditional food, we've all been eating it forever. And that's great. So until 2019, when we all woke up one day and the European Union had decided, actually, do you know what? For the last 20 years, ever since we had this catalogue, we know it, but it's novel today. Okay? And you need special authorization to get it, okay? To be able to sell it. And that's going to cost you somewhere around, there's loads of figures being bandied around about what the novel food certification will cost from the EU, but I asked the FSAI last year what they would imagine it should cost and who they would recommend people to use in order to put forward a successful application for novel food certification, and I called some of the people that the FSAI recommended, and it's somewhere around 3 million as far as I can gather. So what that means is that nobody except a corporation could possibly afford that money. Nobody. Okay? And that's the way that is. And so then the European Industrial Hemp Association went off, and we exhaustively found, well they did, and there are loads in Ireland as well, loads of examples in the Irish literature and the old Irish literature of hemp as food. But so the European industry gathered up all the evidence showing all of the uses, all of the food. I mean, it's so extensive, and I think somebody that you were talking about the really early one today.
From 40 to 50, right?
Yeah. So I mean, and it's extensive. So that when that was brought back to Europe, Europe said, actually, they're all too old. We want you to give us examples from during the time when the plant was banned in the 20th century. That's basically what they said. It's outrageous. Okay, so in the meantime, we have in Ireland, we're going to come back to Ireland now, and we're going to have that conversation there. Okay, so 2016, the industry in Ireland, and you have to remember that we do have a very old industry here, okay, but the CBD wave, that kind of, real interest in that, and it's really good money, and really good food, people getting turned on to hemp. It was really driving forward the industry, okay? 2016, the FSAI had two people asked them about CBD food supplements, okay? And I know both of them, both people. But then it trickles along nicely until around 2018. Okay, and then at that point, we start seeing shops being raided by police or products being taken off suppliers and out of shops and etc. etc. So a criminalisation of the industry. Then you have, following on from that, you had, some of the raids were like even carried out like drug raids. There was, people's front doors being battered down by guards and I don't know what else. So all this time, okay, it's actually perfectly fine to grow hemp in Ireland. The FSAI say to us that you can grow hemp with a 0.2% THC, and it's perfectly fine to have that sold in Ireland as product including for food. Okay, that was the instruction. Now, 3 weeks ago, we woke up one Thursday morning, and that was all gone. Gone. The information was gone from the FSAI website, and our businesses were completely and utterly devalued. And how that happened was this: the FSAI said to us, "Here's the regulation for your industry that we want you to keep up with," and we said fine. And the people in this organisation itself, have been pushing to try and get the state to work with us to put in place, a proper, stable regulatory framework to protect our supply chains, protect our markets. Okay, they haven't so far done that. But so what they did was they said, here's the regulations, here's what you need to do. We did that, and then they said, okay, now we're going to test your products to see if you've done it well, and they did. And they took them off and sent them to a laboratory, and then the laboratory tests came back. And when the FSAI was interpreting the scientific data, instead of using the 0.2% THC reference value that they had always informed us of, they introduced a completely new reference value that is 1 microgram per kilogram of body weight. And now Kate was explaining to you earlier on today with her little milligram bottles exactly what that means. And but so the FSAI did this without once consulting anybody in the industry. And in fact, I'd written to the FSAI 10 days before that happened. They responded to me 10 days before that happened. And what I wrote to them about was asking them about the methodologies they were going to be applying to the testing of our products, and what kind of equipment they would be using in those tests. And they wrote back to me and they gave me all of the information I needed, but they never, ever mentioned anything about a new reference value that they were going to be applying to our products. So what actually happened was that our products are all compliant with the only advice that this industry has ever been given by FSAI. However, FSAI did a high-level media campaign. They withdrew our products from the market, really high-quality products, did a high-level media campaign, and never once mentioned to people that actually our products were all compliant. They never told people that they changed the goal inside of the report. And so it just had such a negative, detrimental impact. And it's outrageous. There's like farmers who are interested in growing the crop. There's certain brave souls who are represented by this organisation who have shops that will sell your products that you make. And it's these people who are being targeted. Okay? So I know that I have. The first thing I did in 2018 was write a report called the Hemp Report, and it was a response to evidence given to the Oireachtas Committee by the IPCC in Ireland. I asked for a fully integrated development plan for this industry so that we can capture not just the economic benefits, and there are loads of them, but that we assess how we can also get the other ones, the human food nutrition potentials, the environmental potentials, the agricultural system development potentials, and look at providing a new system, a new economic system to account for these benefits, not just for profits. Okay, so as to encourage you know, rural Ireland and farming communities and doing it, because it all has to be embedded at local level.